WWE's product is getting too annoying. It's getting too predictable. It's getting too vanilla. It's getting too blasé. By the way, hey, what's up? Not going to do a fancy intro. I'm not going to do the whole greetings thing. I'm just too drained, man. I've been thinking a lot about WWE and what their product really is. And I realized that my Money in the Bank review may have just been purely driven off of adrenaline, from the ending. I've noticed that with several of my reviews on this channel, they've been fueled by just adrenaline from the ending or from a certain segment. And tonight was no different. Tonight on Raw, the segment with Dean Ambrose coming out, man. And I will say this, the title looks good on Dean Ambrose. With those custom plates, man, you cannot look at Dean Ambrose with that title draped over his shoulder, and you cannot look me in the eye and tell me that that doesn't look good on Dean Ambrose, because it does. And Dean Ambrose deserves to be champion. He genuinely does, but I had a second to think. I've had a while to think. And the WWE product is just getting way too predictable, man. It's getting way too predictable. I went back and thought to myself, what moments from last night's show could I predict? I predicted, without really me knowing, once I took a think back to what my thoughts were in the middle of the show of Money in the Bank, I predicted that the Club were going to come out in the Cena Styles match. The second that ref got taken out, I was like, oh crap, now the Club are going to come out and mess the whole thing up. And lo and behold, the Club came out and messed the whole thing up. And, I could predict Ambrose winning the ladder match. For weeks before Money in the Bank, I was saying Ambrose is going to win the ladder match, and then he's either going to cash in the night of or at SummerSlam. I thought it was going to be at the beginning of the match. I felt it should have been at the beginning of the match. But no, he cashed in at the very end whenever the two guys had already beaten the crap out of each other, which is a wise strategy for a Money in the Bank cash in. But I thought it should have been at the beginning to turn it into an even triple threat. But anyway, I predicted, in a way, that Ambrose would win the briefcase, cash in the night of, and walk out the champion. I predicted that. That was easy, man. It's easy to predict now. You hope that they're going to throw in a monkey wrench, but they don't. I told one of my friends that Ambrose was champion. He hasn't watched WWE programming in close to 8 months. I told one of my friends that Ambrose was champion. He was over the friggin' moon about it. But he hasn't seen any of the build to this or anything like that. And he hasn't seen any of this stuff to do with leading up to Money in the Bank or even to Payback or even to WrestleMania for that matter. He hadn't even seen that stuff. Hadn't watched WWE programming since November. But I told him Ambrose was champion. He was over the friggin' moon about it. And I mean, as I said, it's getting predictable, man. And the product is not good. As much as Vince may want you to think that the product is good, it's not. Vince is always saying, oh, well, our competition, it's no longer a WCW or a TNA. It's all the big sports leagues. It's the NBAs and the Major League Baseballs and the NFLs. Well, think about this for a second. NFL, first off, this is the main argument I've heard Vince make in terms of who their main competition is. He's like, now our main competition is Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football on NBC. First off, your show's on every week. You always claim and you always want your cock to grow bigger when you say it's the longest running weekly episodic show on television. I could spout that line by memory, and I haven't even been watching regular WWE programming for that long. I could spout that line by memory. The longest running weekly episodic television show in history is the tagline for Monday Night Raw. It's running weekly, every week, every Monday in and Monday out, every Monday of the year without fail. Monday Night Football runs less than half the year. Maybe 20 weeks. Maybe a couple more than that. Doesn't run for that long. There's 52 weeks in a year. Only about 20, maybe a few more of that is taken up by Monday Night Football. You have the rest. Where are the ratings going, man? And plus, whenever they are on, they're smashing you in the ratings. Literally, WWE may as well just bend over and apply lube when it comes to going up against Monday Night Football on the ratings. And especially considering they dropped below a 3.0 this past week. When you drop below a 3.0 and still want to make the bullshit argument that you're doing better than some cable television shows, that's bogus at this point. That's bogus. Your fans don't deserve that. The people that watch your shows on a week in, week out basis don't deserve that. Your talent don't deserve that. Like, just, it's a bogus argument at this point. You know, he refuses to admit that change is needed, he being Vince. He refuses to admit that change is needed. But change is needed. There needs to be a change in the roster, or there needs to be more talent brought in from other areas. But you look at people over in New Japan and in Ring of Honor. They know where they're at in those organizations. And you look at the people down in NXT. Arguably, it's not even a competition of who wants to go up to NXT to the main roster. Yes, that's a wrestler's dream, but in terms of the product, NXT is making a better product than WWE right now. I'll tell you why. 3 main reasons NXT is making a better product. 1, not nearly as much programming per week. 2, pay-per-views come around way less often. By the way, did you hear WWE is thinking about moving to 2 pay-per-views a month? 2. 1 for each brand. I get that that would bring more value to a network subscription, but why? There's so much content on the WWE network, you wouldn't even need to have 1 pay-per-view per month in order to make it worth the $9.99. You could just have the NXT shows every week and have all of the other pay-per-views and most of the other Raw replays and SmackDown replays and all that other stuff. And that would make it worth the $9.99 a month. But no, they're wanting to move to 2 pay-per-views a month. But that's beside the point. NXT has far less programming per week. Their pay-per-views come around far less often, and they have a more involved roster. And I'll tell you what I mean by more involved. Everyone in NXT has a purpose. Everyone in NXT has a reason for being in NXT. They get character development. They get time in the ring. They get exposure. They get time to train. They get time off. But they have a reason for being there. And everybody knows who they are and what their motivation is. You look at guys like Tyler Breeze and Apollo Crews. Tyler Breeze down in NXT, you know, the fans down there knew who he was. They knew what he was about. You know, he was the cocky heel who thought he was just this big pretty boy. But now he comes up to the main roster. Nobody knows who the heck he is. And he loses like 70 of 75 matches on Monday Night Raw. Like, what the hell, man? And then you pair him with Fandango purely for the reason that they're the 2 pretty boys of WWE. That's the only reason you pair him with Fandango. Like, legitimately. What else do they have in common besides that they both have pretty boy personas? That's it. That's the only thing they have in common. There's no common interests. There's no person that they're both feuding with. There's no person that they're both allied with. It's just they're both pretty boys, so hey, let's pair these 2 together. Doesn't work. And here's the thing, right? With NXT, you need to think about this. They only have 1 hour of programming per week, right? 1 hour of programming. That's it per week. And then they have their pay-per-views like once every 2 months. They have their, pay-per-views. They have their takeover shows. Their big shows once every couple of months. Maybe. And here's the thing, right? All of their superstars, they have they have a deep enough roster to the point where there could be a superstar that doesn't show up on NXT for 3 weeks at a time. Maybe more. You know, AJ Styles made a great point tonight on the Stone Cold podcast when he was on. He said, if you do one thing too often, it doesn't become as special. But if you pull out something only every once in a while, it's going to become more special to the fans. And the fans are going to get more enjoyment out of that. Here's an analogy. If you love apple pie, if your whole family loves apple pie, they like pie in general, but apple is just the favorite. You have a pie shop just down the street. If you go down the street and buy an apple pie every night, you bring it home, the whole family gets like a couple slices of pie, and then you clear the pie in a night. You go out, get an apple pie every night, you bring it back. You know, first little bit, it's not that bad. First little bit, the apple pie is really good. First couple weeks, it's alright. You know, but then after a while, it just gets to the point where it's like, meh, apple pie is just kind of boring now. And then it gets to the point where you're like, for fuck's sake, give me something besides apple pie. But if you go to the pie shop and then you pick up an apple, and then maybe after that you pick up a blueberry, and then maybe a cherry, then maybe a pumpkin, and then maybe like a strawberry pie, and then a chocolate pie, and all that stuff, and then you maybe bring back the apple after 2-3 weeks, it becomes special at that point. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? Because, like, if you have that same apple pie every day for long enough, you're going to get bored. But if you just bring back the apple pie every once in a while, you're going to get a lot more enjoyment, and you're going to savor it a lot more. For example, I love Dean Ambrose as a superstar so much. And I honestly could watch Dean Ambrose every week on Raw, SmackDown, whatever it may be. I could honestly watch Dean Ambrose every week. But the fact that if they made it to where Dean Ambrose would only come out every 3 weeks or a month, that'd be great. That would make a Dean Ambrose appearance that much special to Ambrose fans like myself. You know, it would make it that much special whenever you would hear the chainsaw rev and then the metal music of Dean Ambrose. You know, it would make it that much more exciting. It would make it that extra little dose of apple pie for the fans. You know, if you only brought back Dean Ambrose every three weeks or a month. It would be great. It would be better. But no, they need to bring back the same guys every week. Same guys. And, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, the brand split's not going to help this at all. I feel like SmackDown is going to benefit the most. Because if they were smart, if they weren't clowns, they would use this brand split as a chance to make SmackDown the place where mid-carders could get exposure, maybe get moved up to Raw eventually, and NXT guys could come up and go immediately into SmackDown. That's what I'm thinking. And plus, NXT, like I said, it's becoming its own promotion in and of itself. In a sense, WWE is competing with its developmental division. Like, Vince McMahon claims that there's no competition, in terms of wrestling shows. Yes, there is. Your developmental division is your biggest competition, and it's being run by your son-in-law, and he's producing a better product. Genuinely. Like, he's producing a better product. Like, look at who's running the show in each of these promotions. NXT, run by Triple H. Great show. Great product. Less hectic programming. The superstars aren't as clustered together, and there's not... You know, each superstar has a purpose, and the main event scene isn't as just a few guys. You know, anyone could be in the main event scene at any time in NXT, and that's what makes it so exciting. But, like, in WWE, you know that there are just certain people that are going to be in the main event scene. When it comes to the women's division, it's Charlotte, Becky, Sasha. That's it. In the men's division, it's basically Roman, Ambrose, Rollins, Cena, you know, Styles... You know, but there's really no one else in that genuine main event scene. And, like, that has to change. Because in NXT, you had so many... Like, the women's division is stacked in NXT in comparison to WWE. You know, you've got girls like Bayley, Asuka, Nia Jax. You had girls down there like Sasha, Becky, Charlotte. You know, the women's division was stacked for the longest time. And... You know, now, like, the women's division on the main roster is basically Charlotte and Becky. You know, the two main women down in NXT have already become the two main women in WWE. You know, and they haven't even been around for that long. And you look at the men's division as well. You've got Shinsuke Nakamura down there. You've got, dang it, I forgot his name already. You've got guys like Ty Dillinger, the Perfect 10. You've got Elias Sampson, the Drifter. You've got that guy that made his debut at TakeOver the End. I can't remember his name. But he was a masked luchador, and he made his debut at NXT TakeOver the End. You've got that guy out there who could be in the main event scene. You've got... I seriously cannot remember these names, man. But seriously, and you've got like Samoa Joe, Finn Balor, all these other guys down there, man. And, you know, like, for example, Samoa Joe and Finn Balor, that was a rivalry that went for 7 months, and they kept it interesting. Like, WWE can barely keep a rivalry interesting for a month. That tells you the difference, man. NXT can keep a rivalry between two people interesting for 7 months. WWE can barely hold on to their crowd for a rivalry for a month. And, you know, I mean, genuinely, like, these clowns in WWE need to pay attention to what Triple H is doing in NXT. I genuinely cannot wait for H to take over the company. Like, seriously, because Triple H has so many good ideas, and he's basically against everything that Vince says is good. You know, like, the third hour of Raw. Even though it may be good for the USA because it's more ad revenue for the USA Network and more ad revenue for WWE, it tanks the ratings and it tanks the viewership. Triple H said on the Stone Cold podcast in fewer words, or in more words to try to dodge his way around this exact point, that he hated the third hour of Raw. He didn't say those words exactly, but he basically said it's the most tedious part of being an exec. It's the most annoying part week in, week out. It's the hardest part week in, week out is booking that third hour of programming. He wants that third hour gone. Like, you can tell. He wants that third hour gone. Just wiped away. Wants it done with. He wants that third hour just out of everyone's minds. You know? And, I mean, with this 3 hour Raw, man, like, the main events don't even matter anymore because most of the viewers are in bed by the time the main event hits. You know, and here's the thing, right? The main event of Raw tonight, it's the same main event for Money in the Bank, and they were also pushing the same bullshit of, oh, it's a WrestleMania main event worthy match, as if it was a new point. You made that point about 10, 15 friggin' times, you goons, to coin a JD from NY phrase, you goons behind the commentating desk. Get those guys off my TV. Seriously, JD, if you're watching this, make a Byron Saxton, Michael Cole, JBL shirt for Get Off My TV. Do it now. Because, like, seriously, Byron Saxton is like Michael Cole without everything that makes him thrilling. And JBL is like Byron Saxton without everything that makes him thrilling. They're horrible. Get Jim Ross back in. Whenever this whole situation with Jerry Lawler gets ironed out, get Lawler back in on Raw. And especially with this brand split coming up, bring Mauro Ranallo up to Raw where he can keep the 3-man announce team there. Delegate Michael Cole down to SmackDown. Bring Jerry Lawler in. Put Mauro Ranallo on SmackDown. Or is he already on SmackDown? I'm sorry if I messed that up. But, like, man, you've just got to get better announce teams. Seriously. Because they bring the whole show down, man. Like, perfect example. In the main event, right? Michael Cole said that Dean Ambrose landed a pedigree when he nailed Dirty Deeds. Like, that's not a pedigree. What Dean Ambrose does is a double underhook DDT. And, like, it barely finishes anybody off, but the last couple nights it's looked like the strongest move in the company. You know, because it puts people out first time of asking. You know, but most times the Dirty Deeds doesn't put away anyone. But for some reason he was like, oh no, that's the pedigree, man. Triple H's 20-year-old finishing move, his highly held finishing move in the company, it's all of a sudden a simple double underhook DDT. The hell, man. These goons need to get the hell off of WWE programming. Literally. And like I said, man, they're bringing the product down. They're bringing everything down, man. And, you know, Vince, he needs to realize that there are people on that roster that he could give championships to, and the crowd would be oh so over with it. And viewership would rise, ratings would rise. If he cut the third hour of Raw, ratings would rise. If he didn't add a third hour to SmackDown, ratings wouldn't get worse. You know, even though I feel like SmackDown is going to benefit the most from this brand split, it wouldn't make SmackDown worse from switching if you didn't add the third hour. You know, it would be overall good for the company. You know, and he's saying, you know, with all this, all the sports leagues are a big competition. You need to think about, you know, I'm not even talking about the late 90s, like before I was even around. I'm not even talking about the late 90s whenever you were the highest rated show on television. You're never going to reach those heights again with really interesting sports going on nowadays. You're never going to reach those heights that you were at in the late 90s. like before I was around, back in like 98, back in 98, and I mean, I came around in January of 99, but, you know, I didn't even know how to talk back then. But like in 98 and 99 and even into 2000, you know, before the Ruthless Aggression era, that was your hottest time in the history of the company, and you were the #1 show on television. You're never going to regain those times back. But you could at least try to see what you could do to improve those things. You know, Roger Goodell and Rob Manfred, they're the commissioners for the NFL and Major League Baseball. They at least take input from the fans. They say, hey, for example, Major League Baseball, they're like, hey, do you think we should put a time counter between pitchers throwing pitches? Yeah. The fans were all for that. Speed up the game a little bit more. It's nice. It's good. It's something refreshing that we want to see. They're like, hey, do you think that we should maybe increase safety regulations to try to decrease fan injury at ballparks? Yes, we think you should do that. We like that. It's fresh. It's new. It's something that they're coming at us for our input. It makes the fans feel needed, and it makes the fans feel wanted. In the NFL, they're like, hey, man, what did you think of this thing that happened this week in the NFL? The fans can weigh in whether it sucked or whether they thought it was good. You know, it makes the fans feel needed, man. Voting for some random, already predetermined match on the WWE app doesn't make the WWE fans feel wanted. Putting a guy in the main event because he started a yes movement before WrestleMania, that's making the fans feel wanted. Putting a guy in a main event match that you had no idea would even come close to that main event match, but putting a guy in there purely because the input from the fans was so strong that it causes you to say, now wait a minute, let's pay attention and let's put this guy into the main event. And not only put him in the main event, but to have him win. That makes the fans feel wanted, and that makes the fans feel needed. And that makes the fans feel like they need to show up week in and week out. And that is how you do it with a fan base like the WWE's. But they say, no, Roman's our guy, man. Seth Rollins is the top guy. You know, and they all wanted Dean Ambrose to win. And yes, Dean Ambrose won, which is great. But now they're prematurely setting up this match at Battleground. Battleground. Battleground is the place where you have matches like Luke Gallows versus John Cena. And, like, I don't know, Dean Ambrose versus... God, I don't even know, man. But you have a smaller championship match. I'm gonna coin something that Stone Cold Steve Austin said. You know, not exactly verbatim. I'm gonna ad-lib a little bit, but he basically said, don't put a big money match on a non-big money program. So, for example, don't put an A+ match on a B+ pay-per-view or a B pay-per-view. You know, don't put an A or an A+ match on a B or a B+ pay-per-view. Example, don't put what you're calling a main event WrestleMania-worthy match on Battleground. Don't do it. Battleground is basically one of those BS filler pay-per-views that they could just take out entirely and the fans wouldn't care. There are those pay-per-views like Battleground, Fastlane, I don't even know, man. Like, the Battleground and Fastlane are the only two I can think of right now. But Battleground and Fastlane, you could just take those out, fans wouldn't care. They wouldn't. They wouldn't care. Because Battleground is the filler pay-per-view before SummerSlam, and Fastlane is that BS filler pay-per-view before WrestleMania. You realize that you could set up a big WrestleMania match just as easy with all the free TV in between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. You don't need to cram a pay-per-view in between the two. You could set up big money matches just fine between, like, Money in the Bank and SummerSlam without having that filler pay-per-view in the middle in Battleground. You could set up those matches just fine. But no. They're like, no, since we're clowns and we're goons, man, I'm a fan of JD. What can I say, man? I use his stuff. Some people may take that as insulting. I don't know, but whatever. these clowns who are running WWE's creative team, genuinely, I feel like Vince Russo would have done a better job at this point, and that is saying something, because according to many fans of the wrestling industry, Vince Russo is the worst thing to ever happen to WWE, but I feel like he would be an improvement on their creative team right now. And they're premature in their booking decisions. They're too quick, too snap to judge, you know. And, you know, with NXT, going back to the NXT versus WWE example, they have so many things done in NXT where you wonder why they do it or what happened in order to cause that, but then you see the payoff. For example, Samoa Joe beating Finn Balor at a house show for the NXT title. Excuse me. Yeah, Samoa Joe beating Finn Balor at a house show for an NXT title. That was the first WWE-related title change in over 20 years at a house show. Like, that is just massive. Samoa Joe beating Finn Balor for the title, much less at a house show. And you were like, wait, why? What? Like, some of the biggest, some of the smartest wrestling fans on the internet, who write some of the best articles on wrestling on the internet, were even like, hell, why? Why? And then you saw the big payoff at NXT TakeOver, the end, and all of the matches that they had after that house show. It was incredible. First ever steel cage match in NXT. It was unbelievable. And, you know, now arguably Finn Balor is going to get called up to the main roster really soon, hopefully, rather than later. It's been rumored that he's going to debut since WrestleMania. Like, seriously, Balor's had his debut rumored almost every week since WrestleMania. And it's getting a little bit ridiculous at this point, sorry. Ugh. But anyway, you see things like that. Excuse me. And at the start you think, wait, why did they do that? Or how did that happen? But then you see the payoff at the end. You do. But with WWE, it's just predictable, vanilla, blasé product. You see, like, oh, Dean Ambrose is going to win the briefcase. Oh, look, Dean Ambrose won the briefcase. Oh, Dean Ambrose is going to cash in later in the night. Oh, look, Dean Ambrose cashed in later in the night. Tonight on Monday Night Raw, the main event between Reigns and Rollins. The second that they went outside the ring and the second that they went over the announce tables, I said, this is ending in a countout. This is ending in a countout. We're going to have a triple threat at Battleground. And when they first announced the triple threat, I was like, hell yeah, Shield triple threat. But then it's like, oh, wait. They're doing it at Battleground, not at SummerSlam. And also, another thing from Monday Night Raw, which makes the WWE stupid, is the way that they had the Wyatt family return. Okay? But this was wide open for a Bray Wyatt babyface turn. Because he's been getting babyface cheers for a long time, and this is the biggest babyface cheer he's gotten, right? You know, because the fans love him. They love his ability to cut promos. He's got the ability, he's got the charisma, quoting Rock from WrestleMania. He's got the charisma, he's got the ability. You know, he's got everything. He can do it all. He can work in the ring. He can talk on the mic. He can get inside a guy's head. He's got the ring psychology. He has everything. But he hasn't gotten that one big push. He's always missed that one last big push. And this was his chance to come back as one of the big baby faces in the company. But yet they were just like, oh, look, let's bring the friggin' New Day out. The Wyatt family, first off, why would they get into a confrontation with the tag team champions when they've never really been in the tag title picture? Like, let's face it, they've been that faction that's never really been in the tag title picture. They're more in the big money title picture. Like, Luke Harper had the IC title for a while. I think Eric Rowan held a title for a little bit as well. Bray Wyatt has held, I think, 1 or 2 titles. Like, some of the more menial titles, like some of the lower down titles, you know. Like, they haven't been a tag title-oriented faction, you know? And why would they get involved with the New Day? Like, that makes no sense. Like, Enzo and Cass, or the Club, I could genuinely see the Club taking the spot as well, Gallows and Anderson, are going to lead into something with the New Day going into SummerSlam, and whomever that may be, whether it be Enzo and Cass or whether it be Gallows and Anderson, are going to take the tag titles off the New Day at SummerSlam. It's going to happen that way. So why put them in with the Wyatt family? It doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense anymore. And I'm losing my motivation to watch WWE programming anymore. I'm losing my motivation to do that now. And, I mean, like, man, what more can I say? It's getting boring, blasé, predictable. everything from the women's division, man, all the way up to the main event scene. It's just boring. And, you know, they never mix anything up. They never give us something that we don't expect. It's always just predictable bullshit and predictable garbage, man. I mean, it's just, that's all it is, man. Like, just absolute clowns running the show, man. They need to run it more like NXT. Get Triple H involved more, man. Get Triple H involved more with creative. Make Triple H more like Vince. Because you see Triple H behind the scenes in NXT doing everything that Vince does behind the scenes with WWE. He's back there with the computer guys, having the headset on, listening into every second of that show. Because if there's one person that knows the business in ring, it's Triple H. It's Triple friggin' H. I get that, you know, the money side of everything and all that stuff, that's more Vince's territory. But if you're talking about putting out a product, in ring itself, Triple H is the guy. By far. So, I feel like they need to make Triple H more like Vince when it comes to WWE. Have him be in there at least for the in-ring stuff. You know, and get, you know, like, here's another thing. One last thing before I go. One thing that I really just want to talk about real quick, one thing I want to touch on, that might make WWE stupid if this is true. One thing whenever they were talking about the brand split tonight on Raw, is I was thinking to myself, there hasn't been any mention of one of the biggest SmackDown stars in history in the last several months, The Undertaker. He's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and one of the greatest SmackDown stars ever. And he hasn't been mentioned since WrestleMania 32. He hasn't been. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, he left his gloves behind, so that probably means it was his last match. Mark Calloway doesn't deserve that. Like, seriously, he has too much respect from the fans, and Vince has too much respect for him to just allow him to lay his gloves in the middle of the ring at the end of a match and call it at that. Like, you know, you look at Ric Flair's send-off. Excuse me, he wasn't even loyal to the WWE like The Undertaker is. He went, you know, he started out in NWA, and then he came to the WWE, and then he was also with WCW as well, and then he came to the WWE, and then he went back to WCW, and then came back to WWE, and wrestled his alleged last match, and then didn't even officially retire, then went to TNA and all this other stuff, and now he's back with WWE on a Legends contract. He's semi-retired. So he's not even fully retired. With as big of a send-off as he got the night after Mania 24, he should have retired right then and there. Right then and there. No joke. He should have fully retired, full stop, just right there, man. Excuse me, man, jeez. Because nobody, I'm telling you, nobody has gotten a bigger send-off than that. Ever. And I get, you know, that was a celebration of his overall contribution to the business. But, I mean, like, whenever you think about WWE, his service to the WWE, didn't do that much. All of his, you know, World Heavyweight Championship reigns were with, like, NWA and WCW. That's where most of his World Heavyweight Championship reigns came. You know, and, like, it's just, and you think about Mark Calloway. You think about The Undertaker. He's been loyal to the WWE for 26 years now. At Survivor Series this year, it'll be 26 years that The Undertaker's been nothing but WWE. Yes, he was in some small promotions before the WWE, but for his entire relevant professional career, excuse me, sorry. For his entire relevant professional career, he's been with the WWE as The Undertaker. You know, and he's one of the most well-respected people in the history of the business. He's one of the best minds in the history of the business. He knows how the sport works. He has the ring psychology, everything. And he deserves 2 or 3 times as big a send-off as Flair got. Because, seriously, in terms of what he did for the business, yes, admittedly, Ric Flair is the best man to ever lace up a pair of boots. But in terms of the best man to ever lace up a pair of boots in the WWE ring, it's Undertaker. Undertaker, hands down, no question. You know, 26 years, in and out, putting on great matches. You know, the last several years haven't necessarily been week in, week out for The Undertaker, but great matches all the time. No joke. Great matches all the time from The Undertaker. And you're just going to have him leave by leaving his gloves in the middle of the ring? Really? No. Mark Calloway doesn't deserve that. If Vince McMahon does not tell Mark Calloway, if that really was his last match, if he doesn't tell Mark Calloway to get his ass down to the ring the Raw after Mania and at least come out and let the crowd cheer him for 5-10 minutes, then Vince McMahon is the biggest clown in the history of wrestling. And we're talking an industry that has Vince Russo involved in it, and Vince McMahon would be considered the biggest clown in the history of wrestling if that really was The Undertaker's last match and nothing happened. Like, I mean, I get The Undertaker's old school, and, you know, you typically go out on your back, as they say, and just sort of ride off into the sunset. But Undertaker, Mark Calloway, doesn't deserve to just ride off into the sunset with no fanfare. You're talking almost 30 years of loyalty to one company. And just that would make Vince McMahon an even bigger goon than he already is. And again, something else that would make him an even bigger goon, if that's at all possible, if you don't offer Undertaker a job as soon as he retires, officially, then something's wrong with you, man. Something is absolutely wrong with you. Because this guy, he's the only guy that could change Vince's mind, period. He was the only guy that Vince would go to regarding storylines at all. He was the only other guy that Vince McMahon would trust with any kind of storyline, whether it was involving Undertaker's character or anything. You know, he was the judge of Wrestlers Court, you know, all this other stuff. Most well-respected guy by most people in the history of the business. And, you know, if you don't give him a job the second he retires officially, you're an even bigger goon than you were before. And if you don't give him a proper send-off, you're an even bigger goon for that as well, if that's at all possible. Excuse me. So, anyway, Taker ran over. I'm just getting real annoyed by the WWE. I don't really want to have to make another video about ranting about the WWE. But if I think of something else, I'll make a separate video about it. Yeah, anyway. And if Battleground sucks, if anything else about WWE sucks in the coming weeks, you'll be hearing from me about it. But anyway, I'll probably make this into a shoot wrestling video just because this thing is so friggin' long. And, yeah, anyway, certified G's and bonafide bosses, stay safe, and I guess I'll see you in the next video or something. See you later.